Chapter 18. A Fiery Rematch. G'day everyone, Rune here, and this is Chapter 18 of my What If Ash Met Meowth First story. If you're new to this series, click the link in the description below to be taken to the playlist. I'd also like to point out that about 65% of people are not subscribed. If you can subscribe, please do, as I'm trying to make this channel self-sustaining. Now, let's begin the next chapter. Upon entering the Pokemon Center's training area, Ash has Kabutops and Dratini take turns sparring with Pikachu and Meowth, so that he can see what moves they have. With Dratini sparring with Pikachu and Kabutops sparring with Meowth, Ash watches patiently. However, what catches his attention isn't the moves they currently have, but the way they're fighting. Dratini is hardly scratching Pikachu, but Pikachu has yet to land a single hit. And while Pikachu is already running out of breath, Dratini is still running around like a kid that has had way too much sugar. He watches more closely and realizes that half of Dratini's attacks aren't even landing because of how fast she's moving without stopping. He then turns his attention to Kabutops and instantly sees how differently he's fighting compared to Dratini. His movements are slow and methodical, with each hit connecting with a massive weight behind it despite how clearly he's holding back. And, like Dratini, all of Meowth's attacks are hardly leaving a scratch. The way they're fighting right now is so different from each other, and from how they fought when he was the one calling the shots. In the past, when he trained with them, Dratini was still fast, but not this fast, needing to stop in order to land her attacks. She missed less, but she got hit more often and still didn't hit very hard. Meanwhile, Kabutops as a Kabuto would be slightly faster, but his movements were clumsy and made them easier to avoid. He'd never understood why his fighting seemed so clumsy, but now... He looks at Charizard out the corner of his eye, thinking back to the battle with Blaine. Then, he stands up and calls everyone over. Once everyone is in front of him, he asks Meowth how he feels about a quick spar with Charizard. Hearing this, Meowth raises an eyebrow in question, but Ash simply asks him to trust him. Giving a shrug, Meowth leads Charizard to the field and they begin to spar. Almost immediately, Ash sees that his hunch was right. Charizard is quite a bit slower than most Charizard, barely being able to keep up with Meowth. However, his bulk and power are clearly his greatest strengths, able to take whatever Meowth gives him and dish it back out. He's even waiting for Meowth to attack first so that he can hit back more easily. This is completely different from how Ash was having Charizard fight. He was having Charizard fight like a rushdown fighter, but now watching him, it's clear that he's more of a charge fighter. Well, I'm old enough to admit when I've made a mistake. Calling over to Meowth and Charizard, he asks Meowth to take everyone to the water fountain for a drink. While Meowth does that, Ash digs in his bag, before pulling out his Pokédex, his National Dex cards, a notebook and a pen. Then, he gets to work on a new plan, while making notes on what he's just learned for future reference. 3 days later, Ash approaches Blaine and asks if they can have their rematch now. Blaine agrees, though he's a little surprised that Ash is challenging him again so soon. Before they leave the inn, Ash remembers that Blaine's gym got wrecked by Team Rocket and asks where they're going to battle. Blaine laughs and asks if Ash really thought that the gym leader with the gym in a slightly active volcano wouldn't have a backup arena, just in case. Point taken. Blaine leads the group to his backup field on top of the volcano. Once there, Blaine restates the rules. 3-on-3, first to lose all their Pokemon loses. With that, they each bring out a Pokemon, with Blaine bringing out Flareon and Ash bringing out Dratini. The moment Dratini enters the field, Ash calls for her to use agility, and like that, she's moving. Hopping from one platform to another so fast she's like a blur. Flareon swivels their head around, trying to keep track of the speedy serpent. Ash smiles as he sees his plan already working. Seizing on the opening, he calls for Dratini to use Swift. Without stopping for a second, Dratini unleashes a storm of stars, not even bothering to aim. The stars all curve and slam into Flareon, forcing them back a step. It doesn't do much damage, but it doesn't need to. The point of this round isn't to knock out Flareon, it's simply to outlast them. Dratini continues to zip around the arena, not staying still long enough for Flareon to hit her. Though it certainly does try, unleashing a flamethrower that it tries to blanket the area in. However, Dratini simply jumps over it and unleashes another Swift, breaking Flareon's focus when it hits. This continues for quite some time until Flareon finally manages to get a lucky hit on Dratini. Catching her in a jump, Flareon catches her with a Flare Blitz, sending her crashing into one of the other platforms next to the Fire type. However, due to the type advantage, this doesn't do anywhere near enough damage to knock her out. And now, they're only one platform away from each other. Before Flareon can get some distance, Ash calls for Dratini to finish the round with extreme speed. In the blink of an eye, Dratini slams full force into the exhausted and weakened Flareon, sending them skipping across the platforms to Blaine's side. There, the worn-out Flareon simply lies there, not having the energy to get back up. With the Flareon down, Ash immediately returns Dratini before she can attempt to dodge the beam of red light. He knows that she's too tired to keep going after all that dodging, but she's too stubborn and eager to help to admit it. So returning her while her back is turned is the only way to keep her from hurting herself. First to bring out their next Pokemon is Blaine, who calls out his Arcanine. Ash is very glad that he waited for Blaine to go first. If he'd sent out Kabutops against Arcanine, Charizard would have roasted him. With that in mind, he sends out Charizard, who eyes Arcanine excitedly. The round starts with Arcanine opening up with Flare Blitz, which Charizard takes dead center. It looks like Charizard is already on the back foot, as Blaine tells Arcanine to press their advantage. But when Arcanine attempts to keep pushing, Charizard grabs it as Ash calls out a move that Charizard didn't know before. Counter! Using Arcanine's momentum as extra power, Charizard flips the large dog over his shoulder and slams him into the stone platform, leaving a large crack in the rock. Charizard grins as he gently rubs the slight bruise on his stomach, while Arcanine slowly gets up, its fur covered in dirt and small rock fragments. This, Ash knows, is where his restraint is really going to be tested. He's never been the most patient person in the world, so waiting for the opponent to attack first is going to be difficult. But he's a trainer. His job is to bring out the best in his Pokemon. And to do that, he needs to adapt to their natural styles. So, he forces himself to wait. To be patient and wait for Arcanine to strike first so that Charizard can catch them in a counter. As luck would have it, all of Arcanine's moves are physical, making it impossible for the giant dog to land a hit without opening itself up to Charizard's powerful counter. The fight is slow and arduous, with neither side willing to give any ground. Eventually, Arcanine lands a critical hit on Charizard with Outrage, causing the two Pokemon to go skidding back while Ash calls out in worry. It was a hard hit, and for a moment Ash worries that it might have been the final straw for Charizard. But, to his relief, Charizard hangs in there, grabbing onto Arcanine and throwing him in a counter that sends the dog crashing into the rock on the opposite end of the arena, knocking it out. Grinning, the dragon-like Pokemon gives a roar of victory before turning to Ash with a grin. Smiling proudly, Ash returns him so he can get some rest after such a drawn-out battle. Finally, the time has come for their final Pokemon. With only one Pokemon left, Ash figures it doesn't really matter what Blaine's last Pokemon is and calls out Kabutops first. To his surprise, the Pokemon that Blaine brings out is an Alolan Marowak. He briefly wonders why Blaine is bringing out a non-Kantonian Pokemon rather than one of the ones he used to battle Misty. Did he just not want to battle Ash with any of the Pokemon he battled his friend with? Well, at least this was certainly going to be interesting. The first thing that Ash does is have Kabutops use Sword Stance. He'd noticed the other day that Kabutops is very proud of his scythe-like claws, so he'd had Kabutops learn some moves that would focus on utilizing them. Another thing he'd noticed is that Kabutops is still very unused to his large lanky body. His movements are slow and methodical because trying to go any faster makes him trip over his own feet. This had actually made teaching Kabutops Sword Stance a bit of a hazard. Ash had nearly lost a hand and Meowth's tail from Kabutops tripping while trying to follow the steps. As Kabutops attempts the movements of Sword Stance, he trips, nearly falling off the platform before righting himself. Thankfully, the effect of the Swords Dance still takes effect, even if only just. However, the bad news is that Marowak had taken the opportunity to get some distance between them before attacking Kabutops with Bone Meringue. Kabutops does his best to dodge, jumping to another platform. However, he misses and nearly falls into the lava, only managing to save himself by digging his claws into the rock of the platform. Checking to ensure that his Pokemon is okay, Ash eyes the lava warily. Blaine, please tell me there's a force field like light screen or something to prevent Pokemon from falling in, because otherwise I don't think I'm comfortable with continuing this. Blaine quickly assuages Ash's fears, confirming that the lava is in fact covered by a massive light screen in order to prevent non-lava resistant Pokemon from falling in. However, he explains that falling onto the light screen is counted as a ring out and thus disqualifies the Pokemon, so Kabutops still needs to stay on the platforms. Feeling much better, Ash nods in understanding before turning back to Kabutops, who's pulling himself back onto the top of the platform. Just as he's back on semi-safe ground, Marowak launches another Bone Meringue. Thinking fast, Ash calls for Kabutops to block it with Protect. The green energy shield manifests just in time, the bone bouncing off it harmlessly before returning to its sender. Ash grits his teeth as his eyes dance between Kabutops and Marowak. With Kabutops' struggles with movement, it's likely that they'll only get one chance to knock out Marowak. While Kabutops can still hit it at a distance with Absorb, it would never be enough to win the battle. But it can keep him in the battle until they can close the gap. Until then, they need to give Kabutops as much of a chance to finish this in one hit as they can. With a plan set, Ash calls for Kabutops to use Swords Dance again, but telling him to do it carefully and mind his footing. As Kabutops does just that, Marowak sends another Bone Meringue at him. Kabutops attempts to use Protect again, but the bone smacks him in the forehead before he can bring up the shield. Thankfully, his hard shell blunts most of the impact, including the second returning smack. The most it does is give some light scratches and irritation. Ash is barely able to hold back a chuckle from the look on Kabutops' face as he rubs the spot on his forehead where the bone hit him. Focusing back on the fight, Ash tells Kabutops to keep using Swords Dance until it stops working. For several minutes, Kabutops does just that, only pausing occasionally to use Protect or Absorb to keep his strength up. He can feel the move's effects starting to stall. Marowak shifts, preparing to throw another Bone Meringue, and Kabutops pauses in surprise. Before, the attack had seemed to have no warning to it, but now he could see the steps, the movements that telegraphed what Marowak was about to do. It was like a dance. Focusing on Marowak's movements, Kabutops waits for the right moment, then jumps to a different platform evading the attack. Then, paying close attention to his footing, as Ash always said, he lands with only a slight stumble. Ash cheers proudly behind him, taking note that the platform is slightly closer to Marowak. He tells Kabutops that it's time to finish the fight, and with a nod, he begins to jump from platform to platform, evading the oncoming attacks from Marowak. His movements make him look like a dancer. A slightly clumsy dancer, but a dancer all the same. Once there is only one platform between them, the two Pokemon charge at each other. Marowak's bone encased in the purple-blue energy of Shadow Bone, and Kabutops' claws enveloped in condensed water. There's a flash as the two attacks collide and the Pokemon pass each other, landing on the platform that the other had been standing on. There's a long moment of silence as everyone holds their breath. Then, Marowak falls, defeated. Ash grins and pumps his fist in the air in victory as Kabutops clashes his claws together excitedly. Smiling to himself, Blaine approaches Ash, congratulating him on his victory and presenting him with his own volcano badge. With that done, Ash and Misty excitedly look forward to their next badge. Before leaving to head to Viridian, the group makes a quick stop at the center in order to switch Kabutops back with Gloom. Since Firo is still enjoying his vacation, it's decided that Dratini will stick around for now. The group hop aboard the next boat to the mainland, completely skipping the island of Wartortle as the events that led to this episode never happened. Since Jigglypuff is now a Wigglytuff and Brock's Pokemon, she never got stuck in Blastoise's cannon and never put all the Pokemon on the island to sleep. With that snooze fest thoroughly avoided, the team excitedly look forward to the next part of their journey. And that, everyone, is where I'm going to leave the story for now. Join me next time as the team arrive back in Viridian after almost a year. I'm Rune. See you next chapter.